Welcome back, guys, to Lunch and Lubricants. I am pre-recording this right after I recorded part one, just because I am working the SEMA event this week in Las Vegas, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to jump on. So just in case, I lose the file again, I thought, all right, let's just knock it out right now and have it ready to roll. So we are rolling into part two of our oil analysis series. There will be 3 parts total. This one is going to be a quick and easy chat about best practices when doing oil analysis. So after we talked last week about all of the important questions to ask yourself, which I have written down here, that I believe are the most important questions to ask yourself. You've got your answers for your fleet, for your equipment that you are maintaining, and now we are going to move forward into how to do proper sample pulling. And now, of course, this varies from fleet to fleet. So again, it depends on your industry, what you're doing, where you are working. But we're going to first talk about ideal circumstances, and then we will kind of move into what to do if you are not in ideal circumstances. So ideal circumstances for anyone with a moving vehicle. So this does not include our stationary manufacturing equipment. I'm talking about automobiles, truck fleets, construction equipment, municipalities, mixed fleets, and so on and so forth. This is really what is important when you are beginning your oil analysis. So you have figured out what your why is. And we will use just an example here. We are going to do a regular testing just to keep an eye on our machines. This is the example I want to use. You are someone who is a fleet manager. You have a mixed fleet, and you want to, of construction equipment, you want to make sure that you are peeking into those machines, doing a blood test, so to speak, to prevent any or to catch any catastrophic failures and breakdowns before they happen. This is like my biggest selling point right now, just because we still are living in this weird world of supply chain issue where parts and like labor are really hard to come by. So let's say maybe you have the part, but now it's really hard to get time in a bay with a qualified mechanic to make your repair. Downtime, costly downtime is extended right now. So why would we not start oil analysis as a preventative measure just to prevent having those big breakdowns where we have to sit and wait for a part that maybe needs to be made and shipped, or we have to sit and wait for labor to be able to make the repair? That's costing you money. When those machines are not moving, that's you are losing money like crazy. So we are doing this now in this example as a blood test to see what's going on and prevent any major failures. So ideally, you have your main maintenance manager or mechanic or the group that you have selected to do this process on a regular basis. And you want to make sure that this is going to be the same people every single time, because they are going to have their ways of doing things, and you are going to ask them to repeat those circumstances and those habits or patterns every single time they do a test. So machine ideally is between the drains. So if you have, say, a 500-hour oil drain interval, this is going to be around the 250 mark. And again, trying to get as close to that as possible to keep that consistency is crucial. And so maybe it is out in the field, or maybe it came back in for, a quick greasing and inspection. That's ideal to bring it back in. But you want this machine to be warm. You don't want to just have it sit for a few days when it's cold. You will still get results. And now you need to make sure you are doing it that way with that machine every single time to keep it consistent. But you're going to get the best look into the blood work of that machine if it is warm and running and has been in operation. So maybe bringing it back in isn't the option. Maybe having your field tech out there when they're making their rounds, stopping by this piece at the 250-hour mark and pausing it in its job and taking this sample. There are sample ports provided in most equipment as places to pull the oil from. And that's going to be, again, best practice is using those ports. So you will have your oil sample. You want to make sure that this jar has remained sealed, closed, no outside gook has gotten in there, no other product has ever been in there that could potentially skew the results and show up as contamination. So you take your fresh bottle, you open the port with your extraction equipment. Hopefully you were provided some or you purchased some. I will link up some that you can purchase if your provider did not give you any. And it's going to come with some tubing. Now, you can reuse that tubing each time, but you do have to flush to make sure you are removing any product from other samples that you've pulled from that line. So now you want to have an extra place to put oil. So a little pail, an extra jar, that's your discard jar, making sure that it's clearly labeled your discard jar so that way you are not accidentally sending that one in, right? But you want to flush that line, enough product out of that line to clear it. And then as it's flowing, you will switch out into the new fresh bottle. You want to fill that bottle as far as you can. The more product you can send, the better. So once you have that full bottle, you are going to seal it up and put it in a safe place. Make sure you have already clearly identified what machine, what product this is from, however you are going to decide to record that. That way it is on that bottle already and cannot get confused with the other samples. Let's say you're doing this all in one day. You have a whole bunch of equipment that you're trying to test. You want to make sure that those are all clearly marked and labeled so that they do not get confused. While you are there with that machine, you are definitely going to want to write down the exact hours. If there's notes, whether that's on the machine or you have it recorded elsewhere in your software program of when the last drain was, what the exact product is with the viscosity, the brand, etc., the full name of the product, and the make, model, year of the equipment, the component that it's coming from, whether most of the time whether or not it is gas or diesel powered, if it's coming from the engine. And any information that you can capture that maybe you need to see on the machine physically while you're with it, gather all of that for that sample and have it ready to go. That is best practice number one. The best way to do it is to send it to the lab as quickly as you can. The less time that sample is sitting around, the better. You can do it. You want to be consistent, right? So if, say, your first round sat for 10 days before you sent it off, now each time you are doing oil analysis, you might want to consider following that same protocol. So gather all your samples and then within a 10-day window, send them off to the lab. We want to repeat the circumstances every single time as much as we can, right? So that is your best practice number one. Now, let's say you decided to bring this machine in and you are doing the sample at the drain, and that is going to be your protocol. You don't have the manpower or the resources to be able to go out to the field and pull a sample halfway between the drain while the machine is warm. So now this machine has come in for service at its drain. It's probably cold. It's been sitting for a couple of days waiting to get in the bay. Just keep all this in mind because now each time you test that machine, you're going to want to repeat this, right? So you have that machine in the bay, you got it up, you're ready to drain the oil. Again, same person should be doing this each time for each piece of equipment. And you're doing it now instead of from the sample port, you're extracting it actually from the drain. So you've pulled the drain plug and you've got all of that oil coming out that is going to get replaced with fresh oil, right? It is so incredibly important to never take oil from the first part of the drain. So that first, good couple of seconds that oil runs out, all, of course, depending upon the reservoir, the capacity, how many gallons are in there, you can be the judge, or the person should be the judge of this. But I would say about a quarter to halfway into the drain is when you're going to want to start filling your jar. Any gunk that has gotten in through air filters or through leaks or, just any stuff that isn't, how do I explain this? When the machines are cold and they sit for a while, all the crap that has been suspended in the oil settles on the bottom of the reservoir. And so when you take that first part of the drain, you're getting all of that crap, and for lack of a better word, and that is not going to be a representative sample of all of the oil in that reservoir because it is highly concentrated with just gunk. And so we don't want, a lot of the times I'll be able to tell if someone has done this because when the sample comes back, it is so red and has so much stuff going on. I immediately stop and say, hey, I have a feeling this was pulled from the first part of the drain. Please retest it before we make any assumptions, right? So to avoid that headache, you want to take it from a quarter to halfway into the drain and capture that oil instead. Same thing, you're going to seal it up, label it right away so you don't confuse it with anything else. Maybe someone should be, as a best practice, writing down, have a note page or a place in the software system for that machine where you can take notes to say, when I did the samples on this machine, here is how, it was indoors in a controlled temperature. It had sat for this many days. The machine was cold, it hadn't been running. And we did it at this many hours. And this was, obviously this was at the drain. Here's the product that was in it, name, viscosity, and here's all of the information about the component that it's coming out of. So that way, every time someone is testing that machine, they know exactly how to repeat those circumstances. That is best scenario number 2, if you have to bring it in and do it at drain. Now, if you are someone who is doing an emergency sample, you're going to get the information that you need from this sample in order to see what's going on. It's not a good way to establish trends because you have no history and you're not planning on doing any further testing necessarily to keep an eye on the machine. It's just an emergency sample to see what's going on. Same thing, best practice, clean environment when the machine is warm if possible, not on first drain. Flush your lines from your extraction equipment if you're pulling from a sample port. Label with all the information. I would probably write down a summary of what you think is going on with the machine and some of the symptoms, so to speak, that the machine has been experiencing, and that is why you are having concerns. The more information that you can provide to the lab, the better. So capture all of that and send in those emergency samples as soon as humanly possible. Sometimes, like with Shell, I believe we have a rush order option that you can pay extra for to get that result moved to the head of the line when it gets to the lab. Overnight shipping, if possible, or have your consultant come out and pick it up same day. We want to get you those results as soon as we can before any more damage can occur to this machine and you have that catastrophic failure. So that is best practice for an emergency sample. Now, for your stationary equipment, your manufacturing equipment, I am not as well versed in this world. I am learning and training in that world now in my role at Shell, but I can say from experience, very similar. These machines run 24 hours most of the time, and so they are always warm. They're always in operation. They do have designated sample ports throughout, and there are special fittings that you can get if you need to add sample ports. It is all dependent upon the PSI that machine is running at and where throughout the system you want to go on the backside of any filters. And then you want to be aware of the pressure in there to make sure that as you are opening or sticking a valve that something terrible isn't going to happen, right? And your maintenance manager will know the safety precautions to take and the ins and outs of this particular machine to make sure that they are in the right place on the system and it is safe and the fitting is designated for the right pressure. So you have these places that are designated to take the sample. Again, same thing, clean sealed sample bottle, labeling it right away so you know exactly where it came from, and capturing as much data as possible about the equipment and the product, the oil product that you are running. Yes, and keeping everything as consistent as possible. I can't stress that enough. I will say from experience, the few headaches that I've had in doing oil analysis typically come from someone not filling out the paperwork. I had a customer who had a ton of trucks that they sampled all, kind of at the same time. They pulled all these samples, so like 40 of them. It was a huge box full of them. And they didn't fill out one piece of paperwork. So not one of those samples was usable. We had to go through and redo the whole thing. So making sure that the paperwork is getting filled out at the same time the sample was drawn to make sure that there is no confusion or missed information. And then making sure that when you are classifying equipment, so when you are deciding what you're going to refer to this piece of equipment as for your records, and this is especially important on the manufacturing side because I had a plastic injection molding plant that had two sections. So the plant was divided in half, and they had 15 machines on one side and they had 20 machines on the other side, all doing the same jobs. They were different manufacturers that made the machines. Luckily, that helped us, but they were all considered machine 1 through 15 and machine 1 through 20. And when they went through and took their samples, this guy labeled it as machine 1 and this guy labeled it as machine 1. And so these samples got grouped in and compared side by side as though it was from the same machine. So we had to figure out how to go through and pull those results apart. And a lot of it was just lost, scrapped data that we couldn't use because we weren't able to decipher which was which. And so we had to come up with a very specific naming, nomenclature for each of the plants, the sides of the plants and the machines and the components that the maintenance staff had to abide by when they were labeling their samples so that we were getting accurate results reflecting the two different machines. So please also keep that in mind when you are deciding what to call your equipment, that there is no way that these can be confused with other units. That about sums it up. I went on a little more than I was hoping to go on there, but it is all very important information for best practices when taking oil samples. So next week, we are going to get into how to interpret your sample results. It's going to be a high-level overview just because there is we could spend weeks and sit down in a physical classroom and learn and train on this. There is so much to know, but I want to give you a very high-level overview and a few helpful tools that you could use in your own shops when you're getting to understand your samples when they're coming back. So thanks, guys. We will see you next week.